Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. Today's guest is a director of fiscal policy at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, a research and educational institute in Midland, Michigan. His name is James Hohman. James, welcome to the show.
Hello, how's it going?
It's going very well. I recently read an article of yours about protectionism, and it resonated with me very strongly. I've been arguing about this with people for ever since really Trump came on the scene, because people would say Trump is a capitalist. And to me, if you're arguing for protectionism, you may be a lot of things, but a capitalist you are not. So my first question, so we can define our terms here, what exactly is protectionism?
The way that its supporters use it is the way that I'm going to define it, which is just that this belief that we can use the powers of government to protect domestic industry from foreign influence, so that we can make sure that our industry is powerful, it employs people, and we all come out ahead through this through protections. So it can be tariffs, it can be subsidies, it can be a lot of things. So for instance, the classic case of domestic protectionism that I think has failed us all is our domestic shipping restrictions. So you can't ship a thing from domestic port to domestic port on a ship that is not built, crewed, and flagged in America. And this means that we don't have a competitive domestic shipping industry. It raises the cost for everyone, and our shipbuilding industry itself, this thing that we're trying to protect, is small and non-competitive. It's a complete failure of protectionist policy, but it is an example of protectionist policy being used to try to protect domestic shipbuilding industries.
So you mentioned tariffs, and that's usually what comes into my mind when I'm thinking about protectionism, right? And we've heard a lot about making other countries pay their fair share. Who actually pays tariffs? With tariffs, first of all, tariffs are taxes on imported goods, right? Was that a fair definition of a tariff?
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's, if you want to bring your goods into America, you're going to be slapped with an extra fee imposed by the federal government. That's the simplest definition of a tariff. And yeah, there's a certain appeal that comes with this, which is let's make them pay for our government. But in practice, it doesn't work like that, because the company is not paying. It's whoever is purchasing those goods who are paying an extra price. And so it's a tax on consumers, just like any other tax. Now, what I think is interesting about the tariff specifically, because again, like, there has been this resurrected interest in the right in protectionism. And so we're trying to say, yes, this is going to let domestic manufacturers compete better against foreign competition. We're going to create jobs in America that aren't being created when we import products from abroad. And it's like, well, I guess it depends. So for instance, if we're protecting, Name a product, and let's go through this process. Well, we're going to export to try and protect American jobs.
Well, use steel. You mentioned steel earlier. So if we're importing steel, this is what I really want to know, and then I'll give you a chance to explain that. So if I'm the say Carnegie Steel, just to throw back to a prior time, right? If I'm from Carnegie Steel and I want to buy raw steel from a foreign company, right? And the American government puts a tariff on that product, the foreign company is not paying that tariff, correct? The Carnegie Steel, the company that's actually buying the product and bringing it into the country, is the company that pays the tariff.
Yes, I believe so. I mean, but that's this is the long economic history, or long economic literature is. But where is the tax effectively paid by? So you can have
that's
the official
down the line.
person,
Yes.
and something
I
else.
just mean at the beginning, it's actually the company that's importing the thing that brings it in. But then you end up driving up costs and the prices, and it ends up the consumers pay it. I got that, but there's at no point, what I'm saying, where the foreign company is paying that tariff.
Yeah. So I believe that's the case. I'm not an international lawyer to try and to figure out the exact incidence of the person, but that sounds right. But in this case, we're protecting domestic steel producers by putting a special tariff on foreign steel. All right, that protects our domestic steel industries. It costs our car manufacturers. It costs any person who uses steel. It protects some domestic interests above others. And that's not even to talk about American consumers, that's a special interest. But what happens with protectionism is that it winds up squeezing a balloon, as in you're trying to protect one side and you're just inflating another. You're not making us all better off. You're elevating some domestic interests over others. We're trying to say that we're protecting domestic interests, but we're really favoring some over others. This is a major problem with protectionism in general. And in fact, so this resurrected interest in the right in protectionism, I think is interesting because it didn't come with new insights about how to avoid the problems of protectionism. It didn't come with a new rationale for how it was going to be different this time. There are clear, basic, obvious reasons why protectionism doesn't deliver on its premise, and you can't just assume them away. And all the people who are selling this new interest in protectionism hasn't found a way to deal with these problems. They're just trying to ignore them and to pretend like they don't exist, but they're real. We got to care about them because what they're selling is snake oil. It doesn't work. It doesn't do the job that our lawmakers promise that it's going to.
So the basic argument is that these foreign companies, they are able to undersell domestic companies. And because their products are so cheap that if we put a tariff on them, it's going to raise the cost of those products and then our domestic companies can compete. But the problem with that, right, is that you're raising the price. You're raising the price for domestic consumers. So you're actually harming consumers while you may be protecting jobs in a given industry, say steel. But now all the consumers that are buying products made with steel have to pay a higher price. And these are, even if you accept the idea that Americans somehow should be elevated above citizens of other countries and get better deals than citizens in other countries, you're not actually giving them that deal, right? Because they're paying the higher price for these products. And that much is implicit in the whole argument of protectionism.
Yeah. So there are some like what you're saying especially applies in places where you're talking about the final consumer product, as in we're putting tariffs on shoes that were already made, and that's going to protect domestic shoe manufacturers over foreign manufacturers. I'm not exactly sure how many shoe manufacturers we have in America, but most of these tariffs deal with things that are further upstream from that. Tariffs on cotton, on basic products, on the things that are in the industrial supply chain. And when you're elevating those over other things, you're costing the people who use those products, the manufacturers who use those products, to protect other domestic manufacturers. So it's, again, like it's a tough thing to do to try and ensure that people come out ahead, even when even if you could gloss over that that effect on the final consumers, which protects manufacturers at the expense of American consumers. But I do want to go back to the basic argument for protectionism, which is that we need this in order to compete. As in, foreign manufacturers are going to undersell us if we don't protect our industries. And this is something that is radically underappreciated of just how much America is winning right now. Like when you hear protectionist talk, you hear that a lot of things that aren't true, that we've deindustrialized, that we've fallen behind, that we cannot compete, and none of these are true. American manufacturers produce more stuff than ever. I mean, we manufacture, we export more than ever. The growing world has been a growing market for American products. This is a good thing. This helps enrich the country. And our protectionists act like that's not the case. Now, I will say on one thing that I think is noteworthy is that we are producing more. We have a lot of efficient industries, at least the ones that aren't subject to massive amounts of protectionism, like domestic shipbuilding. But we produce more things with fewer people, as in there are fewer jobs in manufacturing, not much fewer, but manufacturing jobs are down. I believe, I forget the exact trends, but like we have this idea that the 70s was the golden time for manufacturing. It's been on the decline since then. I think we produced something like 3 times as much as we did in the 70s. And we also have more people in manufacturing jobs than we had then. I think the manufacturing jobs decline is around 2000. I mean, you look up the numbers yourselves, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they're easy to find. I just don't have them memorized. But even though we have fewer manufacturing jobs, it's not like we have fewer jobs. We have more jobs in America than ever, and income is higher. So this idea that we can't compete, that we have to protect, that we're failing, that we're falling behind, it's just not true. But it is a basic psychological bias that we really care if other people are beating us. And so a lot of lawmakers exploit that, or a lot of people arguing for protectionism exploit that to try to get favors for themselves. And we got to look at those calls for protectionism with just a little more skepticism than we're providing now, because there's a lot of bad policies out there that elevate certain domestic interests above others and that make us all worse off.
So again, what about the argument that we've been running these trade deficits for a long time, and that's going to harm us, that we're importing more than we're exporting?
Yeah. So look at the numbers and you'll find that we are also exporting more than we ever have before. We are importing more.
Right. But there is an imbalance, right? The balance of payments is we are actually importing more than we're exporting.
Well, we're also importing foreign dollars through foreign investment. I mean, this is one of the most oversold problems in the world, because when you look at it, it's still the principles of voluntary exchange that's leaving us all better off, as in we're getting products that people want. I know, because people are spending their money buying them, and we're selling more products that other people want. I know, because more people are buying them.
Sure.
And as far as foreign investment is concerned, all of those dollars that go out do come back in the form of foreign investment. It's foreigners buying treasury bonds. It's investing in domestic factories. I mean, some of this is the thing. I don't know if you follow Mark Perry on Twitter. He's at the American Enterprise Institute. He's the University of Michigan Flint professor, and he has a really interesting chart that he shows out, which is the vehicles that have the most American parts in them. And it's not Ford, GM, and Stellantis now. It's some of our southern manufacturers who are doing this. Like, there's a lot of those foreign entities that exist in America are employing people. They're producing products that Americans want. We should look at both imports and exports not as this weird liability that we're only importing because we're not, our domestic manufacturers are uncompetitive. It's simply saying we're taking advantage of the things that people want to make sure that Americans get the best deal. And when we look at the foreign market abroad, that's what they're doing too. People around the world buy more American products. These are good things. And the fact that we import more than we export is kind of irrelevant to me. The question is, are we using the resources of the world to get people what they want? And we are doing that. And again, like, America's a wealthy country, we're growing, and we've got more jobs than ever. Like I don't see what problem a lot of these protectionist policies are trying to solve.
Well, I read an article of yours from, I think, 2020, and you made a very salient point in that free trade is just what happens when the government stays out of the way. Like, the government can't impose free trade on us, is what you said. When I think I was 22 years old, and I read Milton Friedman's book, Free to Choose. And he mentioned this whole trade imbalance thing. And he said that we gain imports at the expense of exports, that we should want more goods and services coming into the country, because that's what real wealth is. Wealth consists of goods and services, not paper dollars. And Adam Smith, I mean, 1776, The Wealth of Nations talked about, it's just people are choosing to trade with other people, with other countries. They want to forego the use of cash, money, whatever, they called it back then, for goods. And the whole idea of the balance in payments, right, was the mercantilist idea that wealth consisted of gold and silver. So when you were buying imports, you're sending your gold out of the country. So they think they're getting poor. But this idea was demolished by Adam Smith and even further by Ricardo with his law of association, right? So the law of association or law of comparative advantage, can you explain that to us?
All right. So I actually want to try and reframe this a little bit, which
Okay.
is that to try and help people, because I think a lot of people are concerned about the balance of trade, right? Like this is a thing that comes up. We're importing more than we're exporting, and this is a bad thing that's somehow leaving us worse off. Okay, what do the imports represent? What are we importing? Well, I don't think there's some. There clearly is no central planner in America telling you to buy foreign goods. You go to the store, you pick up a good, you look at the label, and sometimes it says that it's made in a country other than America, right? Okay, why'd you buy that good? You fully have it within your power to say, this is a fundamental concern to me as an American citizen that I'm encouraging imports at the expense of domestic manufacturers. And very few people do this. Why? Because you either don't have the option or it doesn't matter to you. All right, so why does that decision, and by the way, and also when our domestic manufacturers are looking to sell their products, they look at the foreign market as an asset, as in, great, we can sell more auto parts to companies in Thailand. That's great for us. I'm glad we can diversify our customer base. So it's another win-win situation for them. So we've got win-wins on one hand, where a person purchases a good because the alternatives are more inconvenient than the option to buy a domestic good. And we have on the export side, it's another win-win situation of someone wanting American products. Okay, so where's the losses? I just don't really see it. So there is a theoretical loss in that person who was purchasing that imported good could have purchased something from a domestic manufacturer. Maybe. I mean, it really depends on the product now, doesn't it? I mean, that's a very micro level problem. And what protectionists are saying in general is that we can elevate these domestic manufacturers who we probably don't even know to help that person make a decision. It's going to cost them more, but we're going to be better off, even though that person fundamentally thinks that this product is more convenient than the alternative. So we're going to make them we're going to get in the way of what that person thinks is best for them and say that they're better off. I mean, these are the problems of protectionist policies. It's again, like it's trying to apply a theory and intent, which I think is good. Like we should want American policy to be, or to put Americans first, but in the practical application of these policies, it puts some Americans more first than others.
And doesn't it assume an inelasticity of demand? Because they're assuming, like you said, like I might be choosing to buy this product because of the low cost, and the quality is such that at the cost it's at, I can fit it into my budget. But raising the cost, I may say I don't want it any longer, but that's what they're doing. And it assumes you're going to sell the same amount, even if you raise the price. But that's not accurate either, right? I mean, unless there's the complete inelasticity of demand, which is a very rare thing.
So that's an important point. But when you hear protectionist people, I don't think it's weighing like this. This is again like one of the problems of economic protectionism is that there is, like, for it to work, it has to be done by top men weighing those that calculus of saying that, okay, these products do have inelastic demand. If we're going to increase the prices, we're going to reduce the demand, but this is going to come out ahead because there's going to be the supply chains for this industry are more domestic, and there's going to create higher income, and the manufacturing processes that they're using are a little bit more effective. It's just they have higher labor costs, so we're going to protect that, and here are going to be all the economic consequences. That's not how protectionism works. I mean, this is the second insight that I want to bring to this table, is that even if you have this theory that we can come out ahead if we use protectionism, it's going to get cycled through a political process. And that political process is not weighing the economic costs and benefits. It's weighing the political costs and benefits. So what happens with protectionist policies, at least as far as I can tell, is that congressmen get approached by an interest group and says, do this thing, or let us keep having this thing. Politicians generally are not trying to say, okay, what is our economic model? How are we going to figure out the costs and benefits to the public as a whole from this proposal this interest group has pitched me? Instead, they're weighing the political benefits from giving the interest group what they want and the political costs of not giving them what they want. And those interest groups, like maybe if they had a good economic calculus, they would only be pitching things where the public comes out ahead. And frankly, if I was an interest group and I had something that really benefited the public, seems like that would be a really easy way to get what I wanted. But that's not what it works. I mean, Madison talks about this in Federalist 10 with the problem of faction. It's like, it's easy to tell yourself that what's good for you is good for the nation. But let's try and get disinterested people here who are going to be better judges. And those disinterested people are not our congressmen. Our congressmen have a vested interest in getting political benefits and avoiding political costs. And the calculus that they use tends to favor protectionism, not because it's good for America, but because it's good for their political interests. And this is, again, the problem of concentrated benefits.
They're buying votes. In other words, right? That's what they're doing when they come out here and they offer policies like protectionism. They, one, can get donations from the companies that want to be protected, and two, they can convince their voters to vote for them. So it's a vote buying scheme in part, at least.
So one of the things that I do, in addition to writing things for AIER about protectionism when I've got some time, is that I am a public policy advocate. I am trying to encourage free market policies, in particular those facing the state of Michigan. And what that means is I have to try and understand what's going to change policy. And so I've gotten a couple of useful models to help look at these things. Now, when you say that they're buying votes, that is just one of the things that an interest group can provide a lawmaker. They're the basic three important elements of politics. That's money, votes, and press, or at least attention to an issue. And interest groups are good at trying to say, look, if you do what I want, I'm going to make my campaign contributions. The people who I represent, like a lot of these interest groups do have. I mean, there are a lot of steel workers in America still. And if you give the steel workers what they want, perhaps they're going to be more inclined to vote for you. And especially if you've got a couple of steel mills in your district, they're going to pay more, your lawmakers are going to pay more attention to them. And then press. Press is another interesting thing. Politicians do need to be in the spotlight. They do need attention to them telling their constituents how great of a person that they are. Now, on the other end, the people who pay for these things, so those are the things that politicians want. Interest groups are good at giving our lawmakers things that they want to help further their interests.
Deliver the goods, right?
Yeah. And that's not a corrupt situation. Like, the interest groups are people who are applying their own freedom of expression.
How is that not corrupt? If you are a politician, right, and you are doing something that you don't believe that ultimately is going to harm the country, and you have an interest group that you're basically trading in favors, right? They're going to provide you with X, Y, and Z, and you're going to provide them with A, B, and C. I don't know how that's not corrupt.
So it is easy to take a jaundiced view of the situation. And you're right that there are some people who do it, but let's try and understand how easy we are to deceive ourselves. And this is why I don't think it's fundamental. So for instance, it is illegal to buy votes. As in, you can't give a lawmaker money and say, you're going to vote against us. Here's a check. Now you're voting for us. That is against the law, and people who do that should be prosecuted. And I'm glad that we have the Federal Bureau of Investigation that brings charges against corrupt public officials and the people who bribe them. But we are so easy to deceive ourselves. And again, this goes back to Madison and Federalist 10, and this applies to both people who have a vested interest in a political outcome, who really do think in their heart of hearts that what's good for them is good for the nation, but also our lawmakers who are more inclined to give them what they want because they feel that they are good for the nation. They've got the right ideas, the right political judgments to usher us into the future. And so that's just a mutual coincidence of people thinking that they're both going to
Sure.
let people. But fundamentally, what these interest groups are doing are expressing free speech rights, and that's still important even for the people who I think are not advancing the country's interests.
You won't get an argument out of me. Yeah. And the whole point to me here is that citizens, whether they belong to a company, a corporation, individual capacity, whatever, ought to have the right to speak freely. The problem comes into play is when government is granted power to give out favors. So the thing to do there would be to restrict government power, not to restrict the free speech of the citizenry. But that leads me to another point about this.
Can I stop?
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Because this is something that I care deeply about, of like, given all of these problems, how do you have an effect on policy? How do you get around these protectionist traps that leave us all worse off? Now, have you heard of the Overton window?
Sure.
Yeah, so this actually came from us. It's named after our former vice president, Joe Overton. And the idea is simply that politicians cannot enact whatever legislation they want. They find themselves bound by what is popular, or at least their sense of it. They can only act within a narrow set of ideas, and that range is called the Overton window.
Sure.
And on this issue right now, when you have concentrated benefits and diffuse costs who have won a lot of favors already, federal policy is rife with favoritism, people getting advantages at the public's expenses. And they're getting this because the public has essentially been sold snake oil. So they've been told that they're getting protectionism, but they're really getting favoritism. But the way to get rid of this is to break through public apathy. As in, if you actually get people to care, to see these type of things, to be more skeptical when politicians are selling protectionism, it becomes politically toxic. And then we can start rolling back on the favoritism that is already gone. And so that's one of the things that I'm trying to do. That's why I write about this issue, why I try to promote other people who have some good ideas about this, because it's really, we're a long ways to go before we get rid of the Jones Act, those domestic shipping regulations, or to look at the worst tariffs that increase costs without doing much in way of protectionism. But I think that's just getting more attention to this, getting more skepticism to fighting against that in-group, out-group bias. Because once this is popular, a politician can, when they get approached by those interest groups to say, look, you got to keep our favors, they're saying, look, my constituents don't want it. And that's the most important thing that matters to lawmakers. If we can make this issue more popular, I think we can make some progress.
Sure. Well, that's why you do what you do and I do what I do, is to try to bring light to these issues, right? And it reminds me of one of the greatest costs. No, I'm going to say maybe the greatest cost that can't be measured in dollars and cents here. And that is the restriction on people's liberty, my right to trade with whomever I want. If I want to deal with somebody from China, Russia, wherever, nobody has a right to interfere with that. But that's what these policies do. They limit our freedom. I'm an advocate of all-out laissez-faire capitalism, right? And that is not right now within the Overton window. As you said, people like their minimum wage laws. They like Social Security. They like Medicare. That's why what I want to do is smash the Overton window. I want to broaden the scope of the discussion so that we can actually have a real conversation about what is the right thing to do and what is the best thing to do. And it goes to me beyond just the protectionism, is that there's such an anti-capitalist sort of it's beyond the mentality. I want to say mentality, but it's actually a movement. I mean, even the conservatives, who are supposed to be your pro-capitalist politicians or the pro-capitalist movement, you've got popular conservatives. Tucker Carlson went on an anti-capitalist screed. Donald Trump certainly is no capitalist. Recently, JD Vance from Ohio said some anti-capitalist things. So I think that we really need to promote all-out capitalism. I think it's great. I think this protectionist discussion is phenomenal because so many people seem to be buying into it. I read that I think it's 83 to 86% of economists from all stripes, would they be Keynesians, supply-siders, Austrians, monetarists, whatever, oppose tariffs. They're for free trade. Economists hardly agree on anything, but they agree on this. But yet the public seems to think that it's a good idea. And it seems to me that the reason that happens is because of demagogues like Trump that convince people they're being screwed by these policies and they're going to come and be the savior. Is this resonating? Does this sound familiar to you at all?
Let me try to defend what I call incrementalism, as in like wanting to shift the Overton window. It's really important to have a good idea of where you want to go. Like laissez-faire capitalism. Like I know the benefits of this. I know why it's a better system that than what we've got right now. And what you should want to do is to try to take steps to do this, because we fundamentally, at least in America, and there are different places, I think the dictatorships can wave their wand and get free market capitalism if they wanted it, although it winds up being self-contradictory because the point of a dictatorship is to benefit the dictator and not the public. But we have or try to have a republic in America. And what that means is that politicians react to what is popular. And I want good ideas to be more popular. And I'm going to get that by convincing my neighbors, my fellow voters about about the steps that we need to take to get into a better world. And the best way to do that is to find the excesses, to show that they're unhelpful, and that they're unhelpful even if you don't share my ideology. Just to demonstrate that there are problems, so that we can make incremental steps to that better world. Now that idea, that free market thing, like it provides a lot of insights. It helps us understand what it's going to look like once we get closer to these ideals, but we need to get our fellow citizens along the way to make sure that this revolutionary place that we're headed is places that everyone wants to go, not just the people who have these ideas. So that's why I think incrementalism is really important, because it's not just that there's a better future for us, it's a better future that we all have to want to go to.
Okay, when you say incrementalism, right, do you mean incrementalism in terms of policy or principle? What I mean by that is this. I say I advocate all-out laissez-faire capitalism. I know that we're not tomorrow going to get rid of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, public schools, minimum wage laws. It's just not going to happen. And if it were to happen, it would harm so many people who would get thrown off all of these government programs that the capitalism itself probably wouldn't work. That's my view. So the way that I look at it is this: advocate and say, these are the principles that we need to be reaching for, right? We need to be reaching toward laissez-faire capitalism. Now, how do we get there? What are some steps that we could take? We could lower taxes. We could lower or get rid of the minimum wage. We can introduce a voucher system in education to stir up competition. We can move towards it, but always by keeping the goal in mind, what we want. We don't want a mixed economy. So we don't want to come off, or I don't want to come off as advocating a mixed economy, because then it's like, okay, goal achieved. We've had our contract with America, welfare reform. We've done our job. That to me is a recipe for disaster. So I think we have to argue for our principles, but perhaps move there incrementally. That I'm okay with. What I'm not okay with is saying incrementally that, oh, I think we should cut taxes by X, as if that's the end goal.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But let me tell you about how I think about this, which is that those principles give us insights into what's going on wrong here. And we can test those too, because we do need to make sure that we're not just ideologues who think that we've got the right answer. We need to demonstrate that we've got some improvements in this, which is why I do a lot of empirical testing. I do a lot of, I try to find some evidence that even if you don't agree with me on ideas, you've got to struggle with some of the problems that they cause. So that's where principle is really important. It helps give us a theory. It helps give us something to test. And it can help us identify the places where we're worst off. So again, like, I think we should get rid of the Jones Act. I think that is a step that we can take that would leave us all better off.
Okay, what is the Jones Act? That's where if you're not carrying American goods, you can't go to American ports or some such thing. What exactly is it?
We've talked about that already. It's the domestic shipping requirement that that you cannot ship from port to port in America, from domestic port to domestic port on a ship that is not built, manned, and flagged in America.
Okay,
and owned too. I forgot the owned part. So this is a favor to shipbuilding industries and shipbuilding industries in America. Although outside of warships, I assume, because we do have a huge Navy. But outside of that, the actual shipping ships, we do not have an efficient market for this, and this makes shipping things from domestic port to domestic port smaller and more expensive, and we'd be better off without the Jones Act. And,
and thank you for reiterating that. I appreciate it.
Yes, and I know that, and I think this is a good step to take, because I follow the work of Colin Graybaugh at the Cato Institute, who is trying to test all the theories for how this could possibly come out, how this could possibly, or all the arguments they make for why this is important. He finds them lacking. He uses a lot of good empirical data, but I think he does that because he's got some good ideas about things that about mutual exchange, free market ideas, and emergent order. I mean, you'll have to really ask him about his ideas. I'm not exactly sure, but I think that's some of the reason why he has insights to this Jones Act situation and how we should get rid of it, and we'd all be better off.
What's his name? I'm going to write it down right now because I'm going to try to get him on.
Okay, it's Colin Graybaugh, Grabow, and he's at the Cato Institute. And he's an expert on the Jones Act. He knows. How
do you spell that last name again?
Yeah, Grabow.
Okay, got it.
He just knows so much. He's followed this issue so closely. Check him out, because I think he makes a compelling argument.
I definitely will, for sure. You make kind of a compelling argument yourself.
Oh, thank you. And
so that's why I wanted you on. I read your article. I thought it was great. So before we go, is there anything we left out? Anything you want to add to what we've discussed?
So I do want to reiterate this thing that I think protectionists are exploiting, which is this belief that America's falling behind, and we're not. We're producing more than ever. We've got more jobs than ever. We've got more income than ever. Now we can talk about like trying to make this as a system that works for everyone, but this protectionism that we're talking about really protects some domestic interests at the expense of others, and the supporters for it just don't seem to try and grapple with these issues. So what I view it is like this: as a scientist is pitching his new invention. He's made a creature that is going to chop wood and pick cabbages, and it's made from 100% recycled material, and it's going to take us into the future. But we ask him, Dr. Frankenstein, haven't you already tried this? Didn't you create a monster? Dr. Frankenstein responds, don't worry about it. My intents are pure, and this will work. And everyone should ask, how is this going to be any different? Because we've got bad policies from the past constantly being pitched to us, even though we've seen the results.
Okay, so where can people find you if they want to read your stuff or listen to other interviews you might have done?
Yeah, you can check me out at our website at mackinac.org, and that's MACKINAC. So it's a Frenchified, an English interpretation of a French interpretation of an Algonquin word. So yeah, normally it's not going to make any sense, but it's named after Mackinac Island. So spelled like the island, not the city.
All right. Thank you very much for coming on and sharing your perspective with us today. For now, this is Michael Liebowitz and the Rational Egoist signing out. Remember, like, share, comment, subscribe. Until next time.